Number 8. Operation BODENPLATTE. On January 1, 1945, during the Battle of the Bulge, the Luftwaffe launched an attempt to cripple Allied air forces in the Low Countries. Codenamed Operation BODENPLATTE, or Baseplate, the mission was also carried out in an effort to enable the German Army and the Waffen-SS to resume their advance during a stagnant stage of the ongoing battle. After numerous weather-related delays, the operation commenced at the first possible opportunity, which happened to be on New Year's Day. Allied intelligence noticed the buildup of German air forces in the days leading up to Operation BODENPLATTE, but failed to detect an imminent attack. These failures stemmed partially from the decision to disregard certain intercepted communications and the decision not to make a written note after observing the German stockpiling flares and smoke bombs. Another crucial mistake occurred when the Allies misinterpreted German instructions to fighter pilots regarding the use of flares as preparation for a ground support mission. Several more indicators of an upcoming attack were either overlooked or missed, making it clear in hindsight that the Allies could have done a lot more to prepare for what was to come. But the outcome of the situation could have also arguably been much worse. On the day of the attack, more than 1,000 German fighters and bombers attacked Allied air bases in Europe. While the Germans managed to destroy 156 Allied aircraft, they lost 277 of their own aircraft, some at the hands of their own naval and ground forces, who were unaware of the highly secretive mission. The operation came at a far higher cost than it was worth, and the German losses were one of several factors that the Allies considered before ceasing their efforts to destroy the Luftwaffe. In other words, the Germans did a lot of the work for the Allies via their failed operation. Number 7. The Nazi Wooden Jet Fighter. As the Allies encroached on Germany toward the end of 1944, the Nazis began to frantically brainstorm in an effort to develop a wonder weapon that might reverse their severely weakened position. They developed several aircraft under what is known as the Emergency Fighter Program, including the Heinkel HE-162. Popularly known as the Volksjäger, or People's Fighter, the hastily constructed single-engine plane went from the design to the production stage in just 69 days. It was made mostly from wood due to metal shortages, and the assembly required only semi-skilled labor. Several fatal accidents occurred during test flights, but the Germans continued scrambling to refine the Volksjäger and get it rolling off the production line. And while they touted it as an excellent fighter, it was fraught with problems. The plane had a top-mounted engine, which made it difficult for pilots to bail without hitting the engine. Because of the aircraft's small size, there was little room for fuel, which didn't combine well with the fact that the engine was inefficient to begin with. The Volksjäger was built at several facilities. Engines and subassemblies were built at an underground forced labor factory in Hinterbrühl, but the planes themselves were assembled elsewhere. The Luftwaffe initially planned to build 4,000 Volksjägers, but by the time manufacturing began in early 1945, Germany was clearly losing the war, and the effort was essentially pointless. Only about 320 of the planes were ever produced, and less than 200 were delivered by the war's end. Number 6. Operation Mincemeat. In April 1943, a dead man dressed as a Royal British Marine appeared in the water off the coast of Spain with a suspicious-looking briefcase attached to his wrist. Naturally, the discovery piqued the Germans' interest, and they conspired with pro-Nazi factions of the Spanish military to gain access to the briefcase. In it, they found documents outlining an Allied plot to invade German-occupied Sardinia and Greece. At the time, Spain was under the dictatorship of Francisco Franco, who declared a policy of neutrality in the war. Spanish officials shared the documents with the Germans, then returned them to the British, who discovered through a forensic analysis that the papers had been handled and most likely read. Little did the Nazis know, the dead man wasn't a British soldier at all. He was a vagabond named Glendower Michael, who had died from eating rat poison. The British military had dressed his corpse as a Royal Marines officer, complete with a fake ID identifying him as Captain William Martin, and filled the briefcase with fake documents meant to mislead the Germans. Dubbed Operation Mincemeat, the plan's purpose was to make the Nazis think that they had stumbled upon valuable intel. A British submarine deposited the fictitious officer's body in the bogus paperwork in the Mediterranean Sea and waited for the results to unfold. The plan worked beautifully. Not only did the Nazis think they had gotten their hands on important information, they thought they had done so without the British realizing it. In anticipation of the attack detailed in the phony paperwork, Hitler dispatched tank divisions and other forces to Greece. Meanwhile, around 160,000 Allied troops invaded Sicily, catching the Germans totally off guard. Number 5. Operation Gunnerside. One of the key ingredients the Germans used in their attempts to develop an atomic bomb was a heavy hydrogen isotope called deuterium oxide, or D20, also known as heavy water. After invading Norway in 1940, the Nazis took control of the Norsk Hydro-Vermork plant. They forced workers to speed up the manufacture of this mysterious but crucial component, which the Americans never used, and which played a role in atomic bomb production that is scarcely understood even today. In 1941, Norwegian chemist Leif Tronstad contacted British intelligence and informed them of the Germans' demands for increased heavy water production. Suspecting the Nazis were developing nuclear weapons, the British immediately got to work planning a sabotage mission. In the meantime, Tronstad fled Norway for Sweden. From there, he proceeded to Britain, where he was tasked with training commando units for what became known as Operation GUNNERSIDE. Norwegian recruits underwent weeks of intensive outdoor training to ready themselves for the mission. This was necessary because it wasn't going to be easy to reach the Vermork plant, which was located in a frigid environment and surrounded by a high mountain plateau. Tronstad advised the operations planners against bombing the facility, warning that if a bomb were to hit the plant's liquid ammonia storage tanks, it would endanger civilians. A bomb also did not guarantee the destruction of the heavy water supply, which was kept in the basement. The Norwegian recruits parachuted into the area under the cover of night on February 27, 1943. To reach the plant, they descended to the bottom of a gorge, crossed a freezing cold river, and climbed up a 500-foot cliff. They broke into the property through a side gate using wire cutters, at which point the delicate operation commenced. 2 team members entered the building through a side tunnel and laid explosive charges near the heavy water supply. They lit the fuses, hightailed it out of the vicinity, and soon heard the sound of a satisfying boom coming from within. The most important part of their job was done. The Vermork facility was destroyed, and they could now start the final leg of their mission, skiing more than 200 miles to Sweden. The Germans had Vermork up and running again within months, but the operation was extremely successful in angering the Nazis and slowing down their nuclear ambitions. In fact, the Germans were determined to track down and kill the team responsible for the explosion, but their efforts failed, and the recruits were never captured or harmed. Number 4. Operation Grief. At the beginning of the Battle of the Bulge in late 1944, Hitler commissioned commando leader Otto Skorzeny to run interference on and sabotage Allied communications and morale. Dubbed Operation Grief, the mission involved disguising English-speaking Germans in uniforms from captured American soldiers and sending them behind enemy lines with forged military documents. These undercover troops misdirected tank traffic, switched road signs around, destroyed ammunition dumps and telephone lines, and otherwise acted as a nuisance to Allied operations. And while they managed to spark some confusion and panic among US forces, they failed to cause any serious damage. American soldiers eventually caught on to the scheme and spread the word to be on the lookout for the culprits. They quickly set up road checkpoints, where they quizzed passers-by on American sports and pop culture. Unfortunately, this led to the detention of genuine Allied troops who simply didn't follow these topics. But it also led to the capture of imposters, who tried to throw off the Americans by claiming that commandos were plotting to kill General Dwight D. Eisenhower. He was put into protective housing out of concern for his safety. In the end, Operation Grief accomplished little more than posing an inconvenience to the Allied war effort. The lack of any major progress towards the Germans' objectives brought the operation to a standstill, and the Nazis ultimately withdrew the commandos. American forces continued to search for disguised Germans for several months before realizing that they were long gone. Number 3. The Ghost Army. The U.S. Army developed its first ever tactical deception unit, nicknamed the Ghost Army in 1944. Officially called the 23rd Headquarters Special Troops, the top-secret unit consisted of 82 officers and 1,023 soldiers who spent the final year of the war tricking the Germans into believing that they were a 30,000-strong force. They accomplished this by using visual, sonic, and radio deception tactics. These clever combat con artists carried out 22 large-scale deceptions while armed only with 50 caliber machine guns. Due to the sophisticated nature of their work, most of the Ghost Army's members had backgrounds in art or engineering, or were professional soldiers. With an average IQ of 119, they were one of the most intelligent military groups of all time. Their tactics included using inflatable tanks, fake radio traffic and sound effects, and bogus generals. These methods worked incredibly well, effectively saving thousands of lives while essentially driving the Germans crazy. The The Ghost Army's work was highly classified. Even after the war, members were sworn to secrecy, and the military went to great lengths to hide any trace of the unit. Its existence was revealed to the public in 1985, courtesy of Smithsonian Magazine, and the matter was officially declassified during the 90s. Number 2. Operation EICHE. By the time the Allies invaded Italy in 1943, much of the country's population saw themselves as already having lost the war. Shortly after the invasion, citizens voted their pro-Nazi and fascist dictator, Benito Mussolini, out of power. He was expelled from office and arrested by the King of Italy. This deeply troubled Hitler, who believed it was crucial to keep Mussolini in power in order for Nazi Germany to continue receiving Italy's support in the war. He was correct. In fact, Italian officials had already agreed to meet with the Allies for secret peace talks, but he remained determined to keep Italy on his side. Hitler invaded northern Italy, effectively splitting the country in two, and set to work on a plan to rescue Mussolini from custody. In a mission codenamed Operation EICHE, also known as the Gran Sasso Raid, Hitler ordered Waffen-SS officer Otto Skorzeny to free Mussolini, affectionately nicknamed Il Duce, before he was turned over to the Allies. Skorzeny traced the deposed dictator's location to a remote ski resort in the Apennine Mountains and traveled there on gliders with a team of 16 SS troopers. They approached silently and stormed the property, overwhelming the guards with ease. After destroying the guards' radio equipment, the intruding team found Mussolini, who reportedly exclaimed, "I knew my friend Adolf Hitler would not leave me in the lurch." The entire raid took less than 10 minutes from start to finish, and not a single shot was fired. Skorzeny rushed Mussolini onto a plane and personally escorted him to Austria. Mussolini became the leader of a Nazi-backed puppet government in northern Italy, but by early 1945, the Allies were gaining a clear upper hand on the Italian peninsula. To avoid falling into the American or British hands, or risking being tried as a war criminal in his own country, Mussolini attempted to flee to neutral Switzerland with his mistress Clara Petacci. They encountered partisan forces at the border and were shot dead. The couple's killers made an example out of the pair by displaying their slain bodies in the streets of Milan, officially bringing the disgraced autocrat's reign to a much celebrated end. Number 1. Operation Werewolf. In 1944, the losing Germans attempted to create a resistance force that would operate secretly behind enemy lines as part of a last-ditch effort to turn the tide of the war in their favor. Contrary to popular belief, this regiment of elite volunteers, codenamed Operation Werewolf, didn't operate in disguise or plain clothes. They were uniformed soldiers who were meant to operate similarly to Allied commandos. Headquartered in Berlin, the operations plan was to train recruits in guerrilla warfare tactics that the Nazis had observed among the Soviets in Ukraine and other captured territories. But things didn't go exactly according to plan. Rumors about the existence of a secret Nazi guerrilla force began to swirl shortly after the Allied invasion of Normandy in June of 1944. The following year, the notorious German politician Joseph Goebbels urged every German to fight to the death in what became known as the Werewolf speech. By then, the Werewolf unit had already been partially dismantled, but propaganda continued to spread, primarily via a radio station called Radio Werewolf, which claimed that the Allies were planning to enslave German civilians. Much like Goebbels during his Werewolf speech, the broadcast called on the German people to stand their ground, even if it cost them their lives. After the war, former Nazi officers admitted that the Werewolf unit was inefficient and weak, and that it was led by an equally incompetent commander. In other words, it was never anywhere close to as powerful as it was chalked up to be, and had been a relative non-threat throughout the entirety of its existence. Thanks for watching! Which one of these mysterious WW2 operations shocked you the most? Tell us in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe! See you next time! Bye!